As a reminder for how these trainings will be structured, they will be broken into two parts. The first half will be recorded, and that recording will be made available on the Disability Hub as a resource for all case managers. In that first part, we'll cover some of the more general information that applies to all case managers, whether you're a liaison or not. We'll start out with an update about an initiative we are working on to help us address the shortages of dually enrolled providers on a systemic level through an interagency alignment study. Then, we'll move into talking about strategies for navigating provider shortages on an individual level, like informal support options, non-waiver funded employment services, and other creative staffing options. Finally, we'll discuss actions that lead agencies can take to develop new providers in their area. After that, we'll stop the recording, and we'll have time for some discussion, where you all can share with us and with each other about what you've found to be successful in your area when dealing with provider and workforce shortages for employment services. My name is Cole Sorensen. I am a young white person with short dark hair, and I'm using a communication device. I work for DHS as the E1MN coordinator, and part of my role is serving as the main point of contact for all of you when it comes to E1MN.
Hi.
I'll pass it to Beth.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Yeah, I think
just
it
to
got
make
straightened
sure
out the
all of
other
you
day with someone coming
need to
into
be
the
on
office.
mute.
Do you know?
Let's see.
Okay.
See
Thank
if
you
we
so
can-
much.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah, got everyone muted. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Beth Gruby. I also work at the Department of Human Services in the Disability Services Division, and I'm the Benefits Planning Coordinator. Christy Howe is our Employment First lead. She is the policy lead in the Disability Services Division. She was going to join us this morning, but she had something come up, so she won't be with us. Shauna Olson is our grants manager, and she is helping us with the recording and all of the logistics for this meeting. And then Brana Sleba is our supervisor in the employment efforts area. So, thanks for coming.
Before we get into the content we have for you today, we wanted to share an update about an initiative our state-level E1MN team is working on, the Interagency Employment Supports Alignment Study. This study came about through a recommendation from the Task Force on Eliminating Subminimum Wages, and it was passed in the 2023 legislative session. As a reminder, E1MN came about as a result of federal policy changes in 2014 that meant that states needed to change how their agencies worked together to deliver employment services. Previously, as I'm sure many of you remember, someone on a waiver might have gotten all their employment services through that waiver. But this had to change based on the federal guidance, which is why now, people must move between services provided by different funding streams, and schools, VRS, SSB, and waivers have to work together to provide employment supports. We know this change led to added complexity, and alignment issues between our programs have created barriers for people. We created the E1MN partnership as a way to address these issues and make our system easier to navigate. We're really excited for this interagency alignment study, which will help us identify and implement system-level changes that will make things work better so that people can access the employment services they need, when they need them. We will be doing a study in 2 phases. We know that right now, one of the biggest barriers that gets in the way of seamless and timely employment supports is provider access, especially access to dually enrolled providers. Being able to work with a provider who is dually enrolled is key for creating a seamless experience for people with minimal disruption or delays as they move between phases. But right now, it's not easy for a provider to become dually enrolled, and differences in service rates, billing, Provider enrollment and monitoring standards all disincentivize providers from pursuing that. That is what the first phase of the study will address, and we are in the final stages of getting a contractor in place for this phase. There will be site visits and interviews with employment service providers all across the state to identify what the current pain points are that prevent providers from becoming or maintaining their status as dually enrolled. And we won't just be studying the issues, but also implementing some concrete changes as part of the study itself. Because phase 1 will be focused on providers, most of the engagement we'll do will be with that group. But there may be some opportunities for others to give input on phase 1 as well. After phase 1, which we expect will take about 6 months, we'll begin phase 2, which will look a little more broadly at other opportunities for improving alignment. In this phase, we'll really be diving into the lived experience of people receiving services and what the process looks like for them to move between employment programs. The goal of this phase will be to simplify processes for moving between services and address barriers that cause delays and disruptions for people. There will be a lot of opportunities for people across a variety of different roles, like case managers, VRS and SSB staff, and people with disabilities and their families, to share their feedback and perspectives during this phase. And if you are interested in getting involved, there will be more information coming out in the future about how you can do that. When it comes to this topic of provider shortages, those shortages have an impact on both an individual level and also on a larger systemic level. The solutions to the issue have to come at both those levels, too. As we work on a systemic level to tackle provider shortages, there are individual strategies that each of you can use to help connect the people you support to the services and supports they need. I'll pass it to Beth to introduce some of those strategies.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I am super excited about the alignment study, just because that's something that we've known needs to happen for a long time, and so it is exciting. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we navigate together the provider shortages. It's really, we're promoting employment first and saying that employment is possible, but it's really hard sometimes when there are not enough providers. So just remembering that all of us have a role in navigating all the provider shortages, and it affects all of us. So across every agency, organization, we're seeing across the state and across the nation. So the workforce shortage is a big thing. And then also just the lack of providers. So with that, we all really just need to think about this in different ways and think outside of the box. How do we put things together that can help with this? So it's not all on the case manager. It's not all on the lead agency. You're in this with other people, and working as a team is important. So contacting your VRS and SSB offices in your areas to get information about their providers is going to be important. Finding out if they have suggestions, working with your employment service providers, and we have a lot of things that we're going to talk about with different ideas. All right. Okay, so thinking about things like non-waiver options. What are the options outside the system? We're going to also talk a little bit about how we can be creative and using what we already have differently, and thinking of things that we're just not thinking of, like what are the options, and really just figuring out what are those short-term solutions and long-term solutions. So we'll talk a little bit about all of those. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is informal supports. So we really, as a system, rely heavily on services and supports that are formal, that are within our system. And sometimes it's really good to just really take a step back and think about what are the other informal supports that a person might have in their life. So taking into consideration all of the things. So, things like family, friends, neighbors, teachers, and people's social networks, how do they fit in? So I had a few examples that I was thinking of that I have seen in the work that I've done. Well, one example is of Josh, a boy who is 19 years old, and he and his family went to church with a guy whose name was Jim. And Jim worked at a machine shop, and Josh was really interested in doing machining and things like that, working with his hands and mechanical sort of things. So as I was talking to his dad, we were talking about, well, what are some of the opportunities? And he was saying how there were really no opportunities for Josh to be able to get a job in the community in that area. And I said, well, what if he just talked with Jim? And so they had a conversation with him, just like an informational interview. Didn't set it up formally, but just had this conversation one day after church. Asked Jim what he likes about his work, what he doesn't like, what types of things that he does. And so just getting those kind of networking sort of things going on, that was really great. He's not working there now, but it might be an option for the future. And it's just kind of those inroads. How can we find those? So in the engage phase, really helping people understand, or in the plan phases, helping people understand what their options are, and just having those conversations again with their social networks and different opportunities like that. Another one that I saw just a few weeks ago, this person, I'll call her Paula, knows this other person, Kelly, from the YMCA. So they end up at the same, on the walking track a lot together. And Kelly works at Quick Trip. And they would, be walking, and she would talk about her work. So Paula asked Kelly if they were hiring at Quick Trip and how she could apply. So Kelly wasn't sure if they were hiring, but she said they often have openings, and she was happy to help Paula get an application and fill it out. So just little things like that, conversations that happen naturally, or that you could utilize to help people get the services that they need in an informal sort of way. And another one I had is Brad was transitioning from his job with an accounting firm. And these are all, it was very cool because I don't often get to work with people. We do a lot of policy and a lot of planning and things. But in the last few months, I've actually worked with these 3 people. Actually, there's 4 of them actually. And so Brad was working for an accounting firm. He has MS, and his disability progressed enough that he wasn't able to really work at that company anymore. So he had to quit to manage his disability and his health better. He knows his cousin did something with Social Security, wasn't sure exactly what. So he reached out to her and just asked, what should I do here? So kind of getting that support through informal connections that he had. So he asked her about the services and the support he could get through Social Security and how he should move ahead with that. So kind of doing that benefits planning stuff informally, just in his personal area and network. And then the last one I have, Amelia's personal finance teacher was, and this actually is a friend of mine, friend of my daughter's. Her personal finance teacher talked about different jobs that he has had and how they all built on one another, and how he started in one area and moved. And so he also in that class had mentioned that he would be happy to be a reference for any of his students when they go to apply for jobs. And so Amelia then asked him to write a letter of recommendation so that she has it to give to prospective employers, so that when she applies for a job, she could give the employer that reference. So in the engage and plan phases, thinking of those sort of informal supports that, maybe the employment service providers that you're working with would be the ones doing those sort of things. But people also have a lot of their own networks and their own personal informal supports that could be included. All right, so then in the keep phase, people have all of those things. They still have family and friends and neighbors and teachers and social networks. And so we're going to add in there that the bosses and coworkers are another really great informal support that people can utilize. Just this morning, as I woke up, my alarm went off, and they were talking about, on the radio station I was listening to, talking about a person who had every day she was driving and she saw this person walking, and it was this guy named Bill, ended up walking to work. He walked, they said he walked 6 miles to work every day. And so one day she stopped and asked him if he wanted a ride. And he told her his story. She gave him a ride, and then she set up a Facebook page to get a network of people. And they said after just a little while, he had, I can't remember exactly how many people who had signed up on there who said, yep, I drive that route and I can pick him up and if he needs a ride. And so they connected in that way now. So there are so many different possibilities. But one of them that really sticks out in my head is this woman, I will call her Belinda, who worked at a coffee shop. She had a job coach to start, and she really needed a lot of support when she first started. And after a while, she didn't really need support. So really the job coach was really only there for a few minutes. And the provider was like, well, it's not worth it for a job coach to go there just to support her for a few minutes. So she essentially, the organization said they couldn't support her anymore. So she was losing her job coach. And so she was going to have to quit her job. And her boss really just said, we really want her to stay here. And so what can we do to help? And they said, well, the biggest thing is that she really needs help putting her apron on and tying it in the morning. And she doesn't need a job coach for that. Her boss said, you know what, we can help her. We'll tie her apron for her. So little things like that, thinking how can we utilize those informal supports. Things like carpooling. How can coworkers, they're going the same way anyway. Is there an option for carpooling? Because we know transportation is a huge issue. And how can family and friends or neighbors give rides? Things like sharing clothes. I had a friend who was looking for a job and she needed black pants and she didn't have any, and she didn't have time to go and buy any. And so somebody shared a pair of black pants with her. Just things like that, thinking how we can support people who need it. And then also really being aware of that phasing out of supports. So maybe somebody will need a job coach all the time when they first start their job, but as they learn and get used to their work, we can phase out those sort of supports, the formal supports as needed. All right, I'm going to turn it back to Cole.
Another option to consider for people in need of employment supports is services not funded by waivers. There's a pretty wide variety of options out there across the state. Some options may be less intensive than waiver employment services would be, but they could be a place for someone to start getting some support while they wait for a waiver provider to become available. First on the slide is Career Force. Career Force centers are on by deed, and while many people with disabilities would specifically connect with Career Force to access VRS services, they offer a wide range of career services beyond just VRS that are open to anyone, whether they have a disability or not. For instance, they offer resume writing and interview skills workshops, and you can meet one-on-one with someone for help with things like career exploration, interest assessments, and more. There are Career Force offices across the whole state. In addition to Career Force, Workforce Development Area Boards can be a helpful resource. Minnesota is organized into 16 workforce development areas, and many of the boards in those areas offer employment services, including sometimes specific services for youth and people with disabilities. Beth, can you click on that link to show everyone?
Okay.
I did it early,
Beat
sorry.
me to it.
Okay.
So on the screen, you can see a map of 16 workforce development areas across the state. Beth, you can scroll down to the list of each of their websites. We can take a quick look at Central Minnesota Jobs and Training Services, which serves 11 counties in central Minnesota. There's a tab up here for job seekers, and we can click on the section on youth programs. For example, they list out a bunch of the services they provide for youth up to age 24, like career and post-secondary exploration, job shadowing, internships, occupational skills training, and many more. Not all workforce development area boards offer services, but many do, and they can be a great resource. All right, you can take us back to the slides now.
Sorry,
If a
it took
person
back-
receives adult rehabilitative mental health services, their arms worker can absolutely help them with employment-related goals and skill building, too. This can be a great option for people to get some support around employment, no matter what phase they are in. And finally, another option that may be available for people who have a serious mental illness as one of their disabilities is individual placement and supports, or IPS. This service is not available everywhere in the state, but it is available in many counties. IPS is an intensive service that brings together a team of mental health treatment providers and employment service providers and provides the services someone needs to get a job and then keep that job. In addition to the suggestions on this slide of employment services available throughout large parts of the state, your local area may have additional resources and options that you can keep an eye out for and share with the people on your caseload and with your colleagues. When there is a lack of provider capacity in an area, sometimes there may also be ways to modify how services are delivered to make it easier to get a waiver provider in place. As with all these options, they may not work for everyone, but they are something to explore and consider together with the person and their family. One option I'm sure many of you already consider is remote supports. When there are no providers in the area with openings, remote supports may let you use a provider from a different part of the state who does have availability. If a person lives and works a little outside of a provider's usual service area, in some cases, the provider may be willing to consider an arrangement for hybrid services, where a staff person travels out to provide in-person supports on a less frequent basis and does remote supports the rest of the time. Not all providers are able or willing to do so, but it can be worthwhile to ask. Another really important option to consider is technology solutions, or other adaptive equipment that might reduce someone's need for in-person supports. I know the presentation today is specifically about navigating provider shortages, but just to be clear, teams should be considering assistive technology for everyone as the first place to start, not just discussing it as a backup option when staff is unavailable. There are so many benefits to people when they are able to get more of their needs met without needing to rely on constant one-on-one staff support. Historically in disability services, we've had a mindset that we need to safeguard people from potential risks through constant supervision, but this comes at a cost of people's freedoms to do things like make their own decisions, build their self-advocacy and problem-solving skills, and achieve full inclusion in the community. While there are absolutely needs that really are best met by some amount of staffing, the more we can set people up with tools to help them meet their own needs, the better their outcomes will be, and that applies no matter how significantly someone's disabilities impact them. Examples of technology solutions that might reduce someone's need for staffing at work could be things like interactive apps, where a person can connect with their job coach and access checklists or other supports. Social stories or videos that get recorded for the person that can remind them how to handle different situations on the job. Adaptive equipment to help with personal care needs while at work, and many more things. Assistive technology specialists at VRSB can be a great resource in helping explore these options. And finally, another option that could be considered is having someone the person knows get hired on by an employment service provider to act as a job coach to them. Many providers are happy to hire on a new staff person who plans to only work with one particular client, even if that client and the new staff person are located outside of the area where the provider typically operates. The additional flexibility available under CDCS can open up some other creative options for working around provider shortages. If someone is on CDCS or is on a traditional waiver and interested in switching, you can talk to them about some different options for employment services beyond receiving them from a provider agency. People on CDCS can directly hire staff, and this includes hiring staff to provide employment services. In general, that may be easiest to do in the keep phase, but a staff person could absolutely be hired to support someone in the engage or plan phases too if they have the right skill set and are willing to get hired on for a shorter term position, since waiver funded employment supports could not be used once the person reaches the find phase, except in those limited circumstances where VRS or SSB services are unavailable to the person. But as long as waiver services don't get used to duplicate services available from VRS, SSB, or schools in the case of youth, there can be creativity in self-designing employment supports for someone in the engage, plan, or keep phases. What this looks like can vary a lot, but for example, say there's a person on CDCS who is considering starting a small business, but don't know if it would be the right fit for them. They know someone who has experience running a similar type of small business who offers to be a mentor for them. The person could use CDCS funds and pay the mentor to work with them a few hours a week, where the person can job shadow their mentor, learn more about what it's like to run a small business, and get support with planning out what their small business would look like. Once they're ready for find phase, they could work with VRS or SSB to finalize their business plan and launch their business. And then, once they are stable, maybe they would continue getting ongoing assistance from their mentor with tasks like bookkeeping, marketing, and other tasks that come up where they need support. Also, just as a reminder, people on CDC can get a 30% increase to their budget if they have a need for services to improve their employment opportunities and those services don't fit in their existing budget. That is something that is good to make everyone aware of, both those who are currently on CDCS as well as people who are considering switching, but may worry that going on CDCS may mean they don't have enough funds for things like employment supports. That 30% budget exception can be used for more than just staffing, too. If someone has a need for specialized or adaptive equipment that would increase their employment opportunities, for example, funds from a budget exception could potentially be used for that too. Now, we can go over some strategies for developing new providers.
All right, I'm going to take this slide. Just so you know, Christy was going to be here and do these, so I'm just kind of winging it. But really just talking about how can we develop new providers, thinking about from the provider's perspective. And Christy used to work at a provider, so she really had some good ideas. So hopefully in the future, we'll be able to get more of those as well. But really don't hesitate at all to reach out to us to talk about how can we develop new providers in our area. Really thinking about how we get new providers or how the providers in our areas can maybe expand. So thinking about looking at providers that are close in proximity in the geographic area to you, asking if they could expand. So as Christy said in her notes, most providers, if you approach them and you say, hey, we see that you do this really well, whatever service it may be, and would you be willing to expand into this county or to come over and serve some of the people over in this area? A lot of them, that has happened quite a bit. Really, the great thing about that is they're already licensed. They already have that internal structure and the knowledge. So just really being willing to look around and to ask the providers in a larger geographic area. With this, just thinking about also other providers, Metro residential area providers and employment providers. She has an example of in Rochester, a residential provider was providing services to people. Voc Rehab knew that those residential services were being offered and worked with their lead agency liaison and the VR liaison to ask if they'd begin to offer employment too. And they did. So not only, your current employment service providers may be expanding their geographic area, but also your other waiver providers expanding their services and reaching out into different areas. She also noted a case in Watonwan County. Case managers reached out to the provider in Blue Earth County to see if they would offer services in Watonwan, and they did that. So there's a lot of stuff we know you guys are already doing, but just wanted to give you some ideas for expanding. And then also thinking about the individual, a person who's really passionate can be hired by a provider somewhere else and be a satellite staff. So maybe they're working in one office with a provider in one area, and that person would also be able to travel and go to another setting. So helping to just build out those supports. And then just also thinking about what supports a provider would need to do this, working with them and helping them understand and to be able to get the supports that they need. All right. The next thing is talking to providers about adding employment services. So providers that are doing individual, these are kind of the three that pop to the surface. Individualized home support providers, so IHS providers, day service providers, and pre-voc providers, and residential providers. So thinking about the ones that you have that already serve your areas, and would they be willing to add the waiver employment services to their list of things that they do? We know that it's not a quick and easy solution. We know that they would have to train staff and make that kind of shift, but they're already, again, licensed, and that right now is a big hurdle. We know there is a delay in licensing as well. So if we can expand, providers can expand their services that are already licensed, that will make the process go faster. Let me see what else she has in her notes. Residential providers wouldn't discount residential providers because if they already have a variety of services that they're doing and supports out in the community and things, they can be a really good fit as well. So all of them are going to need that support and connection and making it work and getting the information that they need. MTI, the Minnesota Transformation Initiative, is a great place. Their website, which we can pop in the chat in a little bit, offers a lot of information, and they're really willing to provide technical assistance to providers to help them figure out how to navigate. There are also courses in direct course in the College of Employment Services that providers can access. Again, new waiver providers are going to take the longest to get them going because of licensing, and we are looking at the interagency alignment study at ways that we might be able to streamline some things and align some things better with VR and different areas as well. All right, so that is what we had for the presentation piece. So I think Shauna is going to stop the recording, and we're going to